Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon who is joining from China. It is a great pleasure to be here today. My name is Alessio Pettino, and I'm going to be the moderator for this webinar today. This is the first webinar that the EU SME Centre is organizing together with its implementing partners and the Seconded European Standardisation Expert in China project, SESEC project. And in fact, standards and compliance is a key issue and one of the main reasons why products exported from the EU to China get stuck at the customs. So we decided to plan and launch this webinar series on standards to target this issue. During this webinar series, we will cover many standards-related issues, both horizontal issues, but also we're focusing on specific industries. And we are going to focus in the future, in the next months, on specific industries like electrical products, medical devices, but also chemicals, cosmetics, and other key sectors which are very important for European exporters to China. Today, this first webinar, as a first webinar, we decided to make an introductory one. So to provide an introduction of, to provide a general introduction of how the Chinese standardization system works, to see who does what and what European exporters to China need to follow, to understand how can I identify the standards that I have to comply with, and so on. While in the second session, we are going to focus more in detail into how can European exporters be compliant when exporting to China, both under normal trade as well as through cross-border e-commerce. This is because there are important differences between these two channels. It's a great pleasure to have two great speakers, two very senior speakers today. Not yet. I will introduce them in a bit. Before doing that, I would like to say that this first webinar is co-organized by the Italian Chamber of Commerce, who is the leading implementing partner of the EU SME Centre. And so before beginning the presentation, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Giulia Gallarati, who is the Secretary General of the Italian Chamber of Commerce. She's going to introduce the SME Centre, what does the SME Centre do, as well as the Italian Chamber's role in the SME Centre. So, Giulia, I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you, Alessio, for the introduction. I would like to greet the parties who contributed to make this webinar possible. So the team of the China Chamber of Commerce, the team of EU SME Centre, and SESEC, and in particular the speakers, Betty Schuh and Martina Gerst, and all the participants that connected from Europe and China. So I will be happy to provide you an overview about the EU SME Centre, and as we are the leading implementing partner of the project, and also about the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce. So the EU SME Centre, first of all, is a EU-funded project that from 2010 helped European small and medium-sized enterprises to get ready for doing business in China. Currently, we are in phase 3, of the project that will run for 18 months. Starting date was October 1st, so it will end in March 2022. We, as a consortium, so the institutions that implemented the project are 5 European and Business Council Centre that are basically Italian Chamber of Commerce, China Britain Business Council, the Danish Chamber of Commerce in China, Eurocham, and European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. EU SME Centre is also an official member of European Enterprise Network, and it has partnered with more than 270 government agencies and institutions. His location is in Beijing, in Sanlitun. Next, please, next slide. And the main services that the EU SME Centre provides are Knowledge Center, Advice Center, Training Center, and SME Advocacy Platform. Next. I would like to just remark the importance of the technical assistance that the EU SME Centre provides to the European SMEs. The name of the service is Ask to the Expert, and we provide, the Centre provides a preliminary due diligence on a potential partner and answer to a question about Chinese market. Next, please. So during these 18 months length, there will be organized many activities, in particular webinar and workshop, more than 70 in both Europe and China. The upcoming are the one that will be organized in February 25 to 25th and March 2nd. And then working group and policy meetings. Upcoming, we have in pipeline 11 new reports that will be published soon. And I'd like to highlight two important participation of the center at Hainan Export in May 2021 and at the important fair in Shanghai Aquatech in June 2021. Currently is under development the self-diagnosis tool that is another tool available for the European companies for assessing readiness in China. Next. A couple of words about the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce. So the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce is the only business organization that is both recognized by the Italian government and the Chinese government, in particular from Italy, from the Ministry of Economic Development, and in China, from the Ministry of Civil Affairs. The main aim of the chamber is to boost the internationalization and provide more business opportunities for its member base. We have currently 5 offices. The main one is in Beijing, then we have Shanghai, Suzhou, Chongqing, and Guangzhou. And the members currently in 2020, the end of 2020, were above 570. We represent both multinational corporations, but also small and medium-sized enterprises. Next. So just to let you know where we are, I already mentioned our offices, but for us it's important also to expand our presence in other provinces, in particular in Sichuan. We are going to open very soon a desk in Chengdu, in Shenzhen, that is for the Italian community very important, and Tianjin as well. Next. Next. The objectives of the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce are to represent the needs of Italian companies operating in China, to promote the interests of Italian companies with local authorities, and to be an independent representative and influence as an association as well from the financial point of view. Next. Next. I'd like to highlight the backbone of the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce, his working group. We have currently 12, and those are representing the main sector in which the Italian companies are currently operating in China. Next. We provide 4 kinds of services. One is information services, first market orientation, seminar and country presentation. more customizes business context. So we identify and selecting partner counterparts and incoming, and we organize as well incoming and outgoing mission. Events and communication is another important aspect of our work. We both organize event and both promote. So we provide an advertising service for the companies, and then a specific, if needed, a specific support and consultancy services in HR, logistics, and due diligence. Next. So thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a good seminar. Thank you again, Alessio, for the organization, and to the two speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Giulia. Thank you very much for introducing the SME Centre and the Italian Chamber. Before going into the speakers, I would like to mention that you can, to all the participants, you can write your questions, and anytime in the chat, you can write in public, you can write private message to us, but it's up to you. But please, we really encourage you to ask questions, because we have two very senior point experts today, and they're here to answer your questions basically. So please take this occasion to ask all the questions you have. Moving into the presentation now, I'm very, very pleased to introduce Dr. Betty Schuh, who is a very senior, experienced leader based in China. She had more than 10 years working as software hardware developer in the industry, also R&D project leader. And then after these many years, she started to move into the standardization sector. She contributed to the drafting of several Chinese national standards, and also to International Technical Commission standards. She was also the Standardization and Technical Regulations Director for Northeast Asia at Siemens. And then she also had an experience in the Standards Development Organization of Australia. And now, since a few years, she has been leading the SESEC project. And it is my pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank you again for agreeing to give this presentation to us. I'm switching the presentation.
Good morning, everyone in Europe, and good afternoon for those who are based in China. My name is Betty Schuh, as Alessio has already introduced. Today, I will make some introduction about China's standardization systems. How does it work, and how can they impact your products exporting to China? So today the topic is about the China standardization system. The contents covers those information. First, a simple introduction about SESEC project, and then the standardization system in China, and then the how to identify the standards which are applicable to your products, and then which standards must be followed, which are technical regulations, and which standards you don't have to follow, but they will impact your business or harm the exporting to China. And finally, the international standards in China, how many standards are similar or identical to ISO and IEC, so you don't have to worry about the technical barrier to trade. The last is how to get involved in standardization work in China if you are a small and medium European company which has the branches or have already made the investment in China. And the last is some useful links which will help you to figure out the standards in China, and how to find the useful information in these topics. So first, some simple introduction about our project. The Seconded Standardization Expert in China is a project offered by the European Union. There are 5 partners, which are European Commission and AFTA, European Free Trade Association, and organizations SESEC and SESEC. So our target is to fulfill the requirements and the instruction from these 5 partners to make the most alignments or harmonization between European standards and Chinese standards, so to help the European industries to increase their exporting to China. Our project has already induced 3 phases. The first is from 2006 to 2009, and the second is from 2009 to 2012, and the 2014 to 2017. Currently, we are in the 4th phase of SESEC project, which start from 2018 and will end it until October 2021. Our project is managed by SEN, so the employees are based in Beijing but managed and led by SEN. So what is the goal? Our goal is to support European Commission's policy and the European Standardization Organization's strategic objectives. So the ultimate goal is to enhance the EU-China dialogue and cooperation, and to help the European standardization systems sign the cooperation agreement with Chinese standardization organizations. The final goal is to make sure that European standards, especially the harmonized standards, are similar or identical to Chinese standards, so the European industries do not have to change their products to fulfill the requirements of China. What we do in China, we first do the we promote European and international standards in China. We improve the contacts between project partners and different levels of Chinese administrations, industry, and standardization bodies. We enhance the visibility and understanding of European standardization systems to help China to adopt as much as possible the European new legislation framework regulations and the European standardization systems. Meanwhile, we also gather the regulatory and standardization intelligence. We will see that which standards has been published in China, whether they are in line with European standards or ISO and IEC standards, or whether they are totally different from what we have been made in the Europe. And finally, last but not least, we also do technical lobbying. So if some standards are different from European standards, and we have get the request from the European Commission or from European industry, we will help the European stakeholders to go to the relevant Chinese administrations to do the lobby to see why don't we make a international accepted standards? Why when shall Chinese standards be modified or changed to be identical to ISO and IEC standards, or to see whether we can do some simple modification to make the business life easier of European industries or European small and medium enterprises. So basically, this is also one of our targets. What is our priorities? We currently set up about 10 priorities. First is the technical priority on the left hand, like Internet of Things, information security, artificial intelligence, 5G in digitalization of industry, or the automatic transport, medical devices, and the Green Deal like energy efficiency or green products or carbon issues. On the right hand side is the priority in the policies or the horizontal areas. For example, we take care of the China Standards 2035 to see how China Standards will change, whether it will influence the trade between EU and China. We also check the standardization activity in Belt and Road initiatives and also standardization reforms, all made in China 2025, and some institutional changes in Chinese government which will impact the standardization setting, and some market access requirements like CICC, like cybersecurity, like medical devices registration, some of the requirements or the standards related issues, whether they are different from Europe, so we can timely inform the European stakeholders or the European industries. Then I'll continue to focus on the on China standardization systems. First, the legal framework. In China, the standardization law is the foundation, is the institutional law for the China standardization. It regulates the framework of China standardization systems and define the basic elements of standardization, like who is doing what and how standards will play in Chinese market, whether standards can be regarded as law or not. Then the regulations are under the China standardization law. So we have several standardization authorities like SESEC, China Standardization Administration. They will offer a lot of detailed or sub-regulations. For example, the administrative measures for mandatory national standards, for national standards, for local standards, and for association standards and enterprise standards. Meanwhile, besides SAC, there are many other different ministries. For example, Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, or Ministry of Transportation, or the National Energy Administration or Energy Bureau. They are all in charge of certain sectors, and they are also working on standardization. They also set up some regulations or some certification schemes or some standardization management rules to manage the standards. So in all, you can see that China standardization is sort of a big and a little bit complicated picture because compared to the European standardization systems, where you have the European EN standards and harmonized EN standards, and the EN standards will be adopted into the member state standards. However, in China as one country and one state, there are several different standards. This slide shows the key policies in recent years to show which standards are important and how China standards are work. So from 2015, China started to the standardization reform. So after 3 years, China Standardization Law was published in 2017 and was enforced on 1st January 2018. And during these years, for example, in 2016, there are several actions to simplify the mandatory standards or improve the quality of the standards, or to make the enterprise standards pioneer systems. So a lot of documents will give us a feeling and a guideline to see that some of the standards are very important for our business. Here, let us have a look of which standards are China and how important are they. First, we have the government-led standards. The very heavy one is mandatory national standards. Can be regarded as a technical regulation. It is similar. In Europe, we have the harmonized standards, but harmonized standards is voluntary. But in China, mandatory standards is mandatory. It means that the products have to fulfill such standards. And above the mandatory standards, there are recommended or voluntary national standards. We need to mention that only national standards can adopt ISO and IEC standards. So basically, national standards have a very heavy weight in this picture. So basically, you have to fulfill the mandatory standards. You don't need to fulfill the recommended national standards, but voluntary national standards are also very important. And above the recommended national standards, there are also sector standards in China. Sector standards are made by different ministries. According to China Standardization Law, the ministries have their rights to make standards if you think they do not have the standards in the national standards category. So they can make their own sector standards. So you can see a lot of sectors have their very important sector standards. For example, the Ministry of Transportation made a lot of railway standards. And railway standards can be used as the government procurement standards because the railway in China are state-owned and they only buy the products that fulfill the sector standards they made. So in this sense, it is very important to also look at the sector standards in different ministries. Another good example is the Ministry for the Ministry of Transportation in the highway sector. It is also managed by the state-owned highway companies. So they buy the products according to their sector standards category. And above that is local standards. Local standards are made by the several different provinces. For example, Beijing can make their own local standards on car emission, on car industry, or Shanghai can make higher standards than the national standards for the energy efficiency or for the environmental protection products. So local standards are not as important as national sector standards, but in some areas, you also need to check whether they have some special requirements. However, I have to mention that the Chinese government's intention is that all in China should be a one single market. So there won't be much difference between different provinces. So in this sense, sector standards and national standards are very important for government-led area. On the left hand, we have market-driven standards. Those standards are made by the different players. For example, the enterprises standards are made by the enterprises their own. For example, a small and medium company can make their own enterprise standards. And the government encourage the enterprises or industries to make higher, safer, or stricter standards compared to national standards, which means that China also introduced some subsidy or some top-run systems for enterprises standards to reward those make high quality and better performance products compared to the national requirements. We do not make any judgment here, but this is now existing in China. So we also need to look at enterprise standards and a series of schemes for enterprise standards. And then the association standards. Association standards are newly introduced by China in 2018 in this round standardization reform. Association standards are made by some industry associations or industry federations or some other social groups, social organizations that are legally registered in China Ministry of Civil Affairs, so they can have legal identity or legal entity in China, and they can make the association standards. The association standards is China to learn from the US method to motivate the market-driven standards, or let the market decide which standards will win. So in a lot of IT and ICT areas, there are a lot of associations being very active on making new and quicker and faster standards. On the above of association standards, there are consortia standards. Consortia standards like Wi-Fi, like Bluetooth, like UPnP, like any or like the lighting industry. Some of the industries companies are gathering together and make some standards named consortia standards. Consortia standards is not regarded as association standards in China. They are regarded as enterprise standards, which means many different enterprises make these standards all together. So I know it is quite complicated, but if you only understand the background of those standards, then you can choose from these standards to see which standards I should follow and how can I follow. Because you could see some scenario that one product may have many different standards. It could be national standards, it could be similar sector standards, and it could be some association standards. And those standards are not harmonized. They are sometimes overlapping or conflicting. As a small and medium companies, which standards should I fulfill? Then we will discuss this in the later slides. So here is some text of introduction of the different category of standards. Mandatory standards basically are the technical requirements for to ensure the people's health and safety and their lives and their lives and their property, and ensure the national and eco-environmental safety and security. So basically, mandatory standards are pretty much follow the ISO and IEC requirements that only those relevant to human health and safety and environmental protection and national security can be made for mandatory standards. If you are not quite understand, you can make a similar comparison of, for example, mandatory standards are similar with our harmonized standards in Europe, but it is even more with even more legal power. It is mandatory. You don't have the chance to show that you have to fulfill the mandatory national standards in China. And the second is recommended or voluntary national standards. Basically, they are technical requirements that meet the common principle or common technical size for the products. Sector standards. In the absence of voluntary national standards, sector standards may be developed to meet the national unified technical requirements within a sector. What does it mean within a sector? It means that the sector could be a railway, the sector could be a highway, or a sector could be a banking industry. For example, the China Banking Bureau can make a standards specially used for all the banks. It is easy to say because all the banks currently belong to China state-owned. So the next level is local standards. Local standards meet the special requirements as local natural or environmental conditions, or meet the higher requirements from some specific cities. So the local standards are very, very rare, but some of them could be seen, for example, in North China, where the weather is very cold. They could set up some local standards to see under 40 degrees, minus 40 degrees, how a phone should be working, or how a car should be started, how the engine requirements under minus 40 degrees. Or there could be a local standards in Tibet, which means that as high as 4,000 kilometers latitude, how can a bottle to boil water, whether the water require can kill all the germs or whatever, or similar thing like that. So basically, it is very rare in China. It is only to meet the local natural conditions. The association standards are the market-driven standards, meet the needs of market and innovation. And enterprise standards basically are for their own use. Basically, if there is no subsidies or if there are no enterprise standards top-runner systems, the government or anyone, no one will care whether you have enterprise standards or not. So basically, it is really the company's decision whether you should make a enterprise standards. However, if you want to show that you have better enterprise standards, or you want to get the reward or your advertisement via standards, you can still join the top runner systems of enterprises standards in China to show that your products are the best in your sector. The other standards that could be mandatory, as we see that mandatory standards can only be national standards. However, there are some sectors they can make their own mandatory standards, which are, for example, the medical devices area. So you could see some sector standards become mandatory because they belong to the environmental protection, they belong to engineering construction, or they belong to medicine and health. So the medical devices or food industry can make their own sector mandatory standards. So in this sense, you have to be very careful to not only check the national compulsory standards or mandatory standards, but also look at the sector standards. Because in China, mandatory standards and sector mandatory standards are regarded as law, which you have to fulfill. And also the safety standards, for example, some police requirement standards or some public security requirement standards can also be mandatory. The last maybe not very relevant to us, the military-related sectors or the national security and security-related sectors like nuclear, aerospace, those sectors still have their own rights to make sector mandatory standards, which are also law in China. Now we have already seen that the the different category standards, how can I see which standards are mandatory and which standards are voluntary? So basically, there is a rule. The rule is if there is a code for the standards, no matter it is national standards or sector standards, if it says GB only, or the numbers only, it means they are mandatory. But if the GB standards with a slash and T or slash and they, or the sector standards with a slash T or slash they, it means they are voluntary standards. So basically, the pure code standards are compulsory or mandatory standards, and the code with slash T are definitely voluntary standards. So you can see that meanwhile in China, the national standards are coded as GB or GB slash T or GB slash they. GB slash they is more like the technical report. It's similar like ISO and ICPR technical reports. And in sector standards, NN means the different code. So basically, there are currently 67 kinds of different sector standards. For example, YY means medical devices, and YD means the telecommunication, or SG means the SD. I can't remember. I have to check because 607 is a lot. But you also need to know that there are many. And the local standards is DB. That's a local DB 1234 means compulsory local standards. DB slash T 1234 means voluntary standards. And enterprise standards, Chinese government give that a code named with Q. And also you could have the national certified reference materials and also some other codes. Then these slides just to give you the code of the existing many sector standards. For example, the AQ is workplace safety. There's a lot of AQ compulsory standards. If it is AQ slash T, it is voluntary. So I repeat it several times to make we notice such difference. And also the DB is earthquake, or the or you see, for example, 22 JB is machinery. So if you are producing consumers products and doing CICC, China compulsory certification, you still will meet a lot of GB standards. So some of them are compulsory, some of them are voluntary. But because it is referenced by the China compulsory certification scheme, it becomes de facto compulsory. I will elaborate those later. So here is the first page of sector standards. Please remember that. And I will distribute these slides later for your reference. And the second page of another 30 different sector standards. So we can easily see, for example, the 40 is atmosphere standards, or 52 is TB is land administration, or the 52 is sports. What kind of sector standards could be sports? For example, how the sports court, like a tennis court, which requirements they need, the safety, the croquet balls or the basketballs, anything that in sports sector could be made by sector standards could be made by number 52 TD. And the number is what I mean number. It does not need to have such number. I just want to show that different codes show different sector standards. Now we know it is such complicated system. Who is doing what is the main player? So basically, you have to remember that different category standards are made by different players. National standards are made by SESEC. That's China Standardization Administration. And sector standards are made by different sectors or ministries. For example, MIT, Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, Ministry of Transportation, National NMPA, National Medical and Pharmacy Administration, they are dealing with medical devices, and etc. So basically about 30 to 40 different ministries and organizations have the rights to make the sector standards. And the local standards belongs to the state council or the governments, and the social standards are made by the Federation Industry Association, and industry standards are made by industry. And on the left-hand corner, we also have some very special standardization development organizations like CCSA, China Communication Standards Administration. They are making the telecommunication standards, for example, 5G standards or GSM standards. And CE Electrical Standards Institution, they are focused on the electronic standards. So in another word, the IT and ICT have some special arrangement for the standards setting in China. Yeah, so the last is the standards, who is doing what. We have already discussed in the previous slides, and then we just continue to go to the how to find the standards in China. Here is a figure of China, like 39,000 national standards and 72,000 sector standards. How can we find different standards? I will show in the several different slices. Here are some details about here. The products, you have to see the just like the directive systems in Europe. We in China, we also have the harmonized standards like EMC standards, product safety standards, energy efficiency standards, which cover all different products. And meanwhile, each specific standards also may have their own standards. For example, a car have their car standards, a computer has a computer standards, and a television has a special television standards. So you have to check the horizontal standards in the horizontal level and also the vertical standards in the vertical areas. How to find out your standards? If you go to Chinese National Standardization Information Platform, you put in the keyword and check the scope of the standards and read it and to see whether it is fulfill their requirements. Unfortunately, Chinese standards are in Chinese language. So if you need some help, you can contact us or contact the EU SME Centre in China to help you to make some simple introduction of such standards. And here, which standards must be followed? As I've already said, mandatory standards have to be followed. But voluntary standards, if 80% of the industry are using their standards, you have to find out and you have to fulfill that. And if the standards are government-led and used by the government as a procurement, you have to fulfill that. And if a voluntary standards that are adopted by compulsory certification scheme, you also need to fulfill that. other standards are fine. You don't have to fulfill because they are voluntary. But if the voluntary standards are de facto dominating standards or certification scheme or recognized by the government, you have to fulfill that standards. So international standards, why we talk about this? Because I give you a number, 10,000 ISO and IEC standards are adopted by China. So basically, ISO standards adoption rate is about 30%, and IEC standards adoption rate are 70%. So 70% means if you are an electronics products producer, you may not need to be worried so much about the difference between Chinese standards and ISO and IEC standards. So how to join the China standardization work? First, you have to register or have the legal entity in China, and then you can participate as a member. Or if you are not a member, you can still make your comments for the standards that online for public comments. And then you can leverage the industry associations. Ask, for example, small SME Centre or any other industry federation association in China to help you to submit your comments or get the information. Or you can join the workshops or organize workshops to do some lobby, which I doubt whether we small and media company can do that, but you still can join and to show your voice. And you can apply the membership, but you have to be the Chinese. I think you better to be Chinese nationality because the working language is Chinese. And also you have to pay some membership fee, but which are not very much. So it's better to join as a technical committee TC member to collect the information. And last but not least, the useful links. You can visit our website to get some information. And European Commission and China also set up a cooperation platform, EU China Standardization Platform. They offer English language bibliography data of Chinese standards. So this is a very good resource to help you figure out the standards. It is not complete yet, but we're trying to make it as complete as full as possible. And then the following website are in Chinese language only. You have to find a Chinese employee. You'll find some other helpers in China to help you figure out the standards you need. Today, I just make the introduction as this, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we can answer the question after the webinar. And yes, the presentation will distribute after this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. So thank you very much, Betty. And as she mentioned, yes, we're going to distribute all the PPTs after this webinar and together with a recording of this webinar. I also would like to mention that today is just a very general presentation, but in the next month, we're going to organize specific presentations on standards on specific industries like electrical products, chemicals, and medical devices. I would also like to say that as the SME Centre, if you would like to have some general overview of some basic information about specific standards, you can contact us at any time, and you can also contact SESEC and Betty at any time. We will be very happy. We also have some frequently asked questions on our website where we guide you with screenshots to how to find certain standards on the national platform. I see we have received one question, but we will answer that after the next presentation. But in the meantime, if there are any other questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. So I'm very happy to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Martina Gers. Martina is a very senior technical advisor trainer for market access in China. She has been based in China for 15 years, during which she has advised many European SMEs about market access in China, standards and conformity in different sectors, food and beverage, electronics, ICT, and so on. And she has also participated in R&D projects. And in the past few years, Martina was also the Standards and Conformity Assessment Expert of the EU SME Centre. And so we are very happy to have Martina again here today for this webinar. And of course, in addition to having held positions at Fortune 500 companies in the past. So Martina, I would give the floor to you. And I will switch your presentation. You just tell me when to change the slide and I will do it for you.
Okay, Alessio, thank you very much for the nice introduction. Good afternoon in China and then good morning in Europe. I also will stop the video for the bandwidth. So, okay. I think you can go to the slide, Alessio, with the content overview already. Yeah, as Alessio mentioned, market access is one of my, major fields of expertise in China. I'm in China since 15 years, and basically Betty has introduced already in a comprehensive presentation the Chinese standardization system. And I will focus more on the market side of things, yeah. And this means first to give you an idea of what is the China market, what are first steps, as you can see here, but then also to show you how to access the market and what you have to do, what are major differences between if you export the classic way, general trade, or if you do cross-border e-commerce, which is one of the big topics since a couple of years in China. And then, of course, I will also give you some recommendations or some. Next slide. We can start with So actually, what I said, I'm in China since 15 years, and the Chinese market has changed continuously all of the time. And despite all difficulties, even COVID cannot stop the growth that is expected to continue. So what you can see is from the territory, from the population, it's a very big market. And the growth, and this has been pointed out by Betty as well already, is driven by various plans and measures by the government, but then also by Chinese consumers. So one element of this growth is like the innovation-driven growth by upgrading technology sectors. So strategic industries have been defined in the China Manufacturing 2025, which is out since a couple of years. And those strategic industries are gaining increasing government support and investment, of course, as well. So this offers opportunities in everything, which is healthcare, for example, automated machines or R&D, but also the service sector. A second element is the increasing and changing consumption, and we will come to this in other slides as well. So there is a growing middle class, a growing online consumer crowd, and of course, more and more regional cities are also growing, because the country already is for example, the world's largest consumer market for food and beverages, and the projections are really to continue to grow. So I think the EU SME Centre has a variety of reports and guidelines on that. The next pillar I would like to mention, because this is on the rise since a couple of years, I have to say, is the environmental sustainability. So this is the third element. This is actually pushing the market and continuously changing. So there are opportunities for European SMEs, which are traditionally quite good in everything which is green tech, green building, and I do think there will be also like webinars in the near future, which will go more into this detail. Maybe you show the next slide, please. So you might want to ask yourself, So the EU SME Centre has already mentioned there will be, or there is a diagnostic kit where you can ask questions and do a small evaluation and a self-assessment. But then I also highly recommend to look at the FAQs Alessio has mentioned, which have been collected in the centre over the years. So those questions are usually centered around business development, so finding a partner, due diligence of partners, but also like of HR services, for example, the newest salaries, and so on and so forth. You also can see here the 4 basic publications, which also have been mentioned by Alessio. Another tool I can highly recommend is the market access database of the European Union. It's called now Access to Markets, and it was a facelift over the years. So here you also find a lot of information about procedures and formalities, trade barriers, SPS.